future of electrical grid. We have with us the director of LUMS Energy Institute, Dr. Fiaz, and of course it will be moderated by our director, Mr. Asif Ali Qureshi. And before we begin, I would like to go through the housekeeping rules. So the webinar will be for an hour, and you're requested to keep your videos switched off, and you can post your questions in the chat box. And the format of the program is that after the presentation, the question and answers will be taken care of. The session will be recorded, and we will post the recording on our social media pages and on our website pages. You're also requested to, in the end, fill in the feedback form that is shared. So thank you, all of you. I'd like to hand over to now to the president, Mr. Sajjad Anwar. He is the CEO of AWT Investments as well. So over to you, Sajjad Saab.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sadat. On behalf of CFA Society Pakistan, a very warm welcome to all the participants who are joining us from different locations. Thank you very much for making time to attend this webinar. We are very honored to have a highly distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Fiaz Chaudhry. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation, making the time from your busy schedule to speak on this very important topic, the future of electric grid. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Fiaz is an electrical engineer with over 34 years of experience in senior management roles, power system planning, secure power system operation, project management, and teaching. He has served around the world, including America, Middle East, African regions, as well as Pakistan. Currently, he is director of LUMS Energy Institute. Previously, he was CEO Energy Guild. He has also served NTDC as managing director. He has PhD in electrical engineering from Pujo University, Indiana. Ladies and gentlemen, electricity sector is the backbone of the economy of every country, and in this highly competitive business environment, the availability of reliable, sustainable, and affordable electric power services to all the sectors of the economy is crucial. The power sector of Pakistan is facing many issues, such as huge dependence on expensive imported fossil fuel, exorbitant power generation costs, and old monitoring and controlling mechanism equipped with outdated devices. More so, blackouts are becoming increasingly common due to improper management of electricity network and aging power grid strained to meet the increasing demand for electricity. Globally, the old power systems have been changed and smart grid technology has been adopted for sustainable power system operation. I'm sure you will enjoy this very informative and insightful session for the next 1 hour. Without taking any more of your valuable time, I will hand over the floor to Dr. Fiaz Chaudhry for his presentation, and obviously that will be followed by the Q&A moderated by Asif Ali Qureshi, founder and CEO of Optimus Capital and director of CFA Society Pakistan. Over to Dr. Fiaz.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Very audible, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, everyone. So this is a little introduction for the future of electrical grid. Because the subject is quite vast, and I'll try to justify whatever time we have in about an hour to do justice with the introduction of this enormous, valuable sector, which is, as rightly pointed out, it's a backbone of the country. So now, just allow me. So I'll have cover a few slides on the electrical grid itself and different markets that the structure is usually composed of. So then how this utility landscape has evolved, and some thing among the power system planning. And so what do we have in Pakistan currently, and what are our challenges, and how, as LUMS Energy Institute, we are trying to help the sector in various areas. I'll try to cover that at the last. A very familiar diagram that you have a generating station, or then you step it up, because usually those are far away from load centers like hydropower plants or thermal coal plants. So load is far from the generation resources. So what do? You transmit that power over a long distance through high voltage lines, and then close to the load centers. Then you have substations and distribution substations to supply that power to the households. This is a very typical basic structure of any electrical power system, which is predominantly still in quite large part of the world. It is still the same, but it's changing. So how it is changing, we'll cover a bit later. So under a deregulated market, it means our functions, which were generation, transmission, distribution, and now few of the suppliers will come in. But each of these functions was vertically integrated, like in electric, as you see, they own generation, they own transmission, they have distribution network as well. So that vertically integrated regime has changed for the rest of Pakistan, which is now.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Fayaz. We can't seem to hear you very clearly. If you could just slightly speak up or come closer to the mic, maybe.
Okay, is that okay now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Please interrupt me if you because sometimes actually the same mic, but sometimes this conflict occurs. So remind me right away if you hear any, you can't hear me. Now, so this one, so if you separate these functions, means generation, transmission, and distribution. So generation, we made IPPs, independent power producers. So you separate that function from that vertically integrated regime. And you separate the transmission function, which is NTDC, National Transmission and Dispatch Company. So this function got separated from WAPDA. Similarly, distribution function was separated from WAPDA. It was, divided into 10 discos, which is like Lahore Electric Supply Company, LESCO, FESCO, EPCO, IESCO, and SEPCO and HESCO in South in Sindh. So these functions got separated. So this is, we call it, unbundling of these functions. But under the deregulation, so when you try to introduce the competitive market, that's where is another step which we are taking now under CTBCM, competitive trading and bilateral market. So we are going to go under the purely deregulated regime. So under that, you have a computation in generation through power pooling, generation wholesaling, and trading between a large load or between the generators or generation and load. Direct bilateral trading you can have under that computation in the regime. And in the transmission is typically considered as monopolistic business, because you develop those transmission lines within a certain jurisdiction. In one jurisdiction, it is difficult to allow 10 people to build their lines. If 10 people are bringing wires to your house, it will be a mess. So that's why under one jurisdiction, geographical jurisdiction, like in maybe Balochistan area or in Sindh area, you can have a separate transmission company, but within one geographical location, having multiple transmission or distribution company is not advisable. That's why it is, you can say, considered as a monopolistic business. So what did you do with this? Like in NTDC, we have a dispatch company. So you do, sometimes this function is also separated, but for the time being, this transmission function as well as dispatch function is given to NTDC, and asset maintenance or grid system operation is also under that monopolistic business. And then use of system charge, and under this regime, then you need to provide an open access as long as the transmission company has capacity within it. So you will provide an open access to all the generators or our loads. But then, so one generator can sell its power to another jurisdiction or another load in another jurisdiction through power wheeling. So, or sometime, the asset maintenance business, which is line maintenance and fault cleaning, all that can be outsourced if it is not done under one umbrella. Similarly, meter service providing and billing services or collection in a supplier business, you can separate these functions out, and you can have a complaint section separately. So customer service division can act separately, independent of the wire business, because they can provide you quickly that service, and they can monitor through a regulator that how quickly those customers are being served. There is a complaint. So this is the whole objective of this deregulation, is to basically benefit customer. But if the processes are set right and the regulator really make it a compliant for all the players in the market, only then customer is really served. Otherwise, a customer like now, through relatively poor service, it keeps on suffering. So the objective here is to going into the market so that the people can get reliable electricity, but somehow this affordability world over, that objective has not been met yet. Yes, reliability has increased, but still people are having the cost of electricity has not gone down that much as it was expected. So I took a lot of time on this slide, but this was a busy slide. So what did you do? How do you administrate this electricity market? So we tend to have, instead of NTDC as a transmission company, that you have a dispatch company within which is hosted inside the transmission company. So it has to, this function has to be separated, and this function, system operation, has to be made independent. Why? Because it has to, it cannot have any conflict whatsoever. That's why this function has to be independent. So what it has to do, it has to operate the system in an independent fashion, in a transparent fashion, and through a marketplace. Either market operator can be housed within this system operator, or the market operator can be as a separate entity. What it has to plan the new capacity as well as ensure the reliability of the system is met through all the transmission or the distribution. So the whole supply chain has to function very well. So somebody is monitoring that particular function. Either it's a fuel supply, are operating a power plant, operating a transmission company, or operating a distribution company. So in this whole supply chain, if one function is not appropriately providing that service, it means reliability cannot be met. So that's why this function as an independent system operator, so that it has authority through the regulator to make everybody comply to the regulatory requirements. So that's why the enforcement agency for this compliance is basically independent system operator, and which has its own rules, market rules, and they need to follow grid code or a distribution code or a transmission code. So the respective companies, whoever is a participant, are providing a service to the market, they should be complying to that code. Either it's a market rule or a grid code or a technical code. So on top of it, regulator, which is in the Pakistan's setup, it is NEPRA, National Electric Power Regulatory Authority. What it does is they are responsible for designing the market and rules for the market. And they need to monitor through ISO how the market is being concentrated. Either somebody is misbehaving. So ISO being.
Sir, I'm losing your voice. Dr. Fiaz, thoda sa, if you could just speak up.
Yeah, can you hear me again now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So this looks like it gets tired. So that's all I can say. But when I switch it back, it starts functioning again. So who is breaking the rules? Who is making a collision? And so all these things are monitored in a market so that nobody can skew the market. So some sort of a policing phenomena regulator has to do. But regulators' eyes and ears are system operator. That's why this function has to be an independent function. Okay. So there are two service providers. One, transmission network service provider, and the distribution network service provider. So I'll not go into, because I have too many slides. So what do they do? I think most of the people know that they simply lay their lines, they plan their lines after getting consent from the system operator to develop their asset, and they operate their assets, and they maintain the adequate reliability, and they service their territories appropriately so that the flow of electricity doesn't stop. Now, so from where that system operator or market operator buys and manages that dispatch from all the generators, it could be GenCos or independent power producers. So we have a large fleet of independent power producers, and GenCos, they're still around, but they're fading away in few years, like Muzaffargarh. So because it's an old plant, so it will phase out. And so a couple of plants have already been phased out, like in Faisalabad or in Multan. We used to have steam power plants, so they have already been retired. So this, as we saw in the very first slide, generation connected to the transmission. So because now the function is separate and their prices are being set separately, and down the road, because they will be market participants, so even if they are not offered, take or pay the contract, still looking at what the business is, how the business is like, and if the market function is healthy, so people will be willing to install their new power plants because they will know like what is the marginal price of a unit and how much will they be dispatched, so they can have their simulations done And as a system operator, they will have to issue a 10-year plan and simulations. Through simulations, people will know if my plant can be dispatched at this level, I will be either 80% dispatch or 60% dispatch. So they do not need to have any guarantee or warranty from any government, because they will know, because market is being operated transparently and fairly. So they will be very willing to install their power plants. So sometimes people question, sounds too good to be true, but that's the ultimate objective of any market, like in any private sector that you see, any grocery stores or any other business that you see. So whoever offers the best product, people tend to go to that particular shop or a vendor to get their service. So similarly, in the electricity sector, it is complex, but the objective of the target is the same. So at the retail end, so you will have traders, you will have wholesale suppliers. So although they will be using distribution companies' wires, but the financial contracts will be with these traders and wholesale, suppliers. So, but if you need to have a detail, you need to have, have a separate presentation on the CTBCM model. So that in itself, I teach that course at LUMS, and half, there's an electricity market, it's a full semester course. So, but I cannot cover in one slide. So I just wanted to introduce you to the subject. So the retailers, so either you can be a supplier of the last resort, like your distribution company, or you can open up your own business. You do not own any wire, but still you buy and sell electricity, keeping some margin. So, and everybody, hopefully, who is listening to me on this forum, because this is a CFA, so many people may be becoming retailers from this, from the audience we have now. And consumers, everybody among us is a consumer of one way or the other. So homes, offices. So I don't think that I need to define who the consumers are. So this, so this diagram on the right to top corner is the same diagram that I showed you in the very first slide: generation, transmission, distribution, and houses. But this regime is changing. It has changed in many countries, and it is changing here as well. But yes, it will take time, but still our pace is slow, but it is changing. So in the very first diagram on the right corner, you see generation, transmission, distribution, and some sort of retail function when you will have a vertically integrated utility like K-Electric. But this is changing. So even sitting at home, you will become a generator. Having you as an electrical vehicle, you can plug in and you can become an energy storage entity and supplying that to the grid. You can have a wind farm, not only parks, maybe on your own roof, you can install a wind turbine, a little wind turbine, you can be a supplier. And then being a retailer, sitting at home, you can buy and sell electricity. So you need a huge communication network. So it could be a large scale power plant, or a solar, or a net metered solar at your on your rooftop. So this whole business is going to be very, very complex. So whatever, so this vertically, so there are functions, they were separated, generation, transmission, they were unbundled, but then they are deregulated. So now, even we are going, so the flow was one-sided from large generators to the household. Now even the flow is going to be backwards. So the business is going to be very complex, where naturally technology will play a huge role to enable this. complex flow of electricity as well as management of electricity. So modern utility business has to evolve. Again, sorry for this because I wanted to put on one slide. This is a busy slide. So in the just a minute, this. So what is the utility of today? What was our focus? Reliability, affordability, and the regulator, which was in olden days, it used to be Planning Commission. Now with the under the unbundled regime, we have NEPA. But down the road, who will be the regulator? So predominantly focus will shift to customer or consumer. So you will be regulating the business as well. But similarly, your energy security, so which is maybe not a core consideration at the moment. So the current focus is we need to operate the system on a lowest cost, and when you tend to do that, naturally, but then you face some of the consequences, like you saw a blackout a few days ago, on 23rd of January, when you try to operate the system on a bare bone, on an economic merit order, not resorting, not paying attention that much to the system security. So, but for that you need to incur a reasonable cost, and you need to keep your system designed such that you do not introduce too many constraints on the system. And I'll mention a couple of examples later on. We did because the kind of system we inherited, and then wherever our resources, like I cannot bring Tarbela Lahore, I cannot bring Tharkol to Lahore. The thing is, load center, your 80% load is north of Guddu. So it means we have to see the longitudinal sort of structure of our system. Accordingly, we need to design those remedial measures. So how can we, even if we have to at night, all your cheaper generation is in the south, your nuclear is south, but you cannot push all that cheaper power to north, because then you have to build extra lines. They may not be utilized fully. So, but you need to keep them for us, but then you need to maintain your voltage. So then you introduce too many complex challenges for yourself. So anyway, so then environmental impact will be playing a huge role. So the customer control, now there is no control, but down the road, customer will have control. Now customers are contacted once a month, okay, either through newspaper, if there is a large outage, or maybe your feeder is going to be out for a few hours, but they simply contact you when they hand over you a bill. But they, down the road, there will be a two-way traffic. You'll be buying, selling electricity maybe on a daily basis. So it means, so it's not one-sided communication anymore. So you will have a computation of your supply. So maybe if you're not satisfied with one supplier, you may choose to another. Although the wires will be maybe of the same company, but those wires are being used through open access by a retailer or a supplier. So who will be your contact? So similarly, our large scale generation is changing. It's a modular, renewables, distributed, rooftop solar. Your transmission maybe become more smart. Your transmission, your passive, some of those lines will have to become smarter to facilitate that communication. and for two-way flows. So it may, and you can even maybe utilize the existing assets much more. You can strategically locate your generation at those places where you can utilize your assets more. Similarly, in distribution, one-way flow, but in a smart distribution network, there will be multi-directional flows, but all those things have to be managed, monitored, so that we do not enter into distribution or transmission constraints. And how the technology landscape is changing and the prices, if you look at the right-hand corner, so how your solar, basically PV, has, and your wind has drastically reduced its price. So look at, almost $200 a megawatt hour. That was the price, but now it is less than 50. Similarly, or about 50. Similarly, your PV cost was way above 300 megawatt hours, but now it is 40s and in 30s. Similarly, that's why this overall utility landscape is changing, because your generation technologies have changed. They have they can be localized. So, but coal plant has to be either mine mouth or it has to be transported, and it cannot be a smaller plant. So, economy of scale, you have to have a bigger plant. So, but these, solar, even your house, it can supply your own power. And now the battery storage, down at the bottom blue, so it has substantially battery pack, or cell prices have decreased. That's why, so this whole utility business is going to be shaken. So all this, big power plants, so you might, as a customer, bring them out of business, and you may cause them, basically huge grief. So they will be only supplying large industries. All the households could go away, and which will be a good thing, because this time supplying household is over 53%. That's what the business of household is, but it is not recovering the utility costs. So what is happening on the renewable sides? Like all these technologies, then storage size, battery, pumped hydro, hydrogen, you name it, and information and control. All these technologies are only enabled if you develop proper ICT technologies. And then, yes, they will benefit, us in carbon capture and climate control. So they will be, these technologies are relatively better than fossil fuel technologies as far as the environment is concerned. So, but this will create another challenge. So at the system operation level. So at first, I always knew how my demand profile was changing. But now, right now, I have no clue how many people have installed and their rooftop solar. As a system operator, I do not have that visibility, where the cloud is covering that particular solar. So it will be very, very complex to forecast demand. So it means a lot of intellectual properties have to be kicked in, and to develop those programs, to cater all those random phenomena, to ensure that the system dispatch is done reliably and cost effectively. So accordingly, government policies have to change because of these renewable technologies are becoming available. So tax regime will have to change. So overall renewable targets that we see 25 or 30, but you will see in one of the slides, can you really do that? Will you introduce another challenge for system operation? So as you know, these days, at night, so you do this wind rejection at night, because so either your load goes so down that all your cheaper generation you cannot transport it to the north. So what system operator does? So easiest route out, that because they cannot trip coal, and because they cannot bring it back early on. But this technology at least enables you to switch off and switch on. So that's why this is, although they, wind farm people, they're making hue and cry, but this is the only maybe option for system operator at the moment, because they cannot fully utilize their transmission capacity, because there are some delays, on the northern infrastructure, that they cannot use fully HVDC capability. Now, so all this large scale, so opportunity for you or for your clients is, so all this new challenges, what they will do, they will have new investment opportunities, and the assets are becoming very smart. So the people have to become very smart. Equipment is getting smart. Your network has to become smart. All these are opportunities for everyone around the globe, and especially we are far behind in these technologies. So so we need to step up now. And we are typically utility people. We are not customer centric. So we need to change our mindset. So this monopolistic or Kabza group mentality has to go away. So we need to train our people. So we need to engage our clients. So this cultural change has to occur. And as you will see, so they will be providing more service, because the customers are going to be demanding more service. So they need to upgrade their distribution network. They need to bring efficiency. But utility revenues are not going to grow, because that revenue is now go through retailers or direct contracts. So they're only going to make their distribution or use of system charge. So they may be think of other businesses, because they have fiber network installed, they can rent it out. So they will have to provide other smart city services, because they have wire business all around. So they need to think of other businesses to make more money of their assets. Because as far as the energy is concerned, so that energy, although it will pass through the network, but they may not be able to recover, because somebody else is recovering that money through the market operator. Now, because to enable everything that we discussed, not many technological changes are occurring, which is now the key bottleneck for this transition to happen. So a lot of investment opportunity for the private sector, for a public-private sector mechanisms, and because the utilities, their typical utility, distribution utility, they do not know these ideas. So maybe some people in the private sector like K Electric, they might have this thought about some of these things, but not typical disco guy. So he is least bothered, okay, because it's a regulated business. So to increase, and the capacity regulator has to step up. So there, and our planning cycle has to reduce. So we, you apply and you hear after 3 years. It's not acceptable anymore. So you need to reduce those timelines, publish those timelines. So, restrict everyone to through a time window for how long can they, really, and how soon they should be responding. So this is, just a pictorial view of a smart grid. Everybody is talking to everyone. And so as far as electricity movement is concerned, again, that has to be smartly controlled, because solar is producing at some time, and some other time wind is producing at some other time. So they're nuclear, and some of the base load plants we know they're producing, but all other, especially the energy storage, when I need to invoke, when do I need to service for frequency control? So all these things are changing drastically the landscape of our future electricity grid. Now, so I think this is a bit of a, and I need to highlight one key word here: cybersecurity. When you are communicating too much, so it means you are vulnerable to foreign threat also through that's why you need to ensure that all your systems are really secure and they operate through a secured environment. So there will be initial setup cost, but it will help. So another aspect, like in remote areas, now the technology has enabled us to have microgrids. So it doesn't have to be all integrated network like MTDC and K-electric. So if some village or some small town or maybe an industrial city, so can be supplied as a microgrid, like Gwadar we are thinking of, because they are not really connected to the national grid. So it's going to be supplied from Iran, but at the moment they are operating as a microgrid. So these things can expand. So what we need to do, we need to accommodate distributed energy resources, more involvement of customers through demand response, and we need to have innovative products and innovative ways of managing our services. So all these things are basically technological driven. So we need to be techies down the road, apart from financial analysts or financial consultants. So each one of us have to understand to some extent the technological changes which are occurring beneath our feet. So now let me, how much time do I have? I'm still on this. So let me introduce very quickly. Am I audible?
Yes, you
Yes,
are.
you are.
Okay, good. So let's go over power system planning basics. So how do we plan electricity, for any country, for any region? This one graph, I'm sure thousands of PhDs have been done on to just optimize this graph. So I can, if I have, I had time, only I can talk about just showing this graph for a couple of hours. I don't need any other slide just to explain what this really graph tells you. But I'll tell you what, in maybe a couple of minutes. This is telling you demand. This is telling you how demand varies. This is telling you what is my payment period. This is telling you where I will not be compensated. So it is telling you what is your peak demand is. Can you really, shave that peak through demand response? And how the economic merit order usually, takes part in the dispatch. Like nuclear, it's very cheap resource on the operating cost, very expensive on the capex, but very cheap on the operation, and it's a base load plant, so you dispatch it first. Then the renewables, hydro, all these are kind of must-run power plants. So you cannot stop water on a run of a river project. Similarly, on some of the storage, hydro you dispatch, at will, but all the renewables, when wind blows, it blows. So you need to dispatch. Similarly, solar, so then they are dispatched. So all that seasonal and a daily variation, you capture through solar, through fossil fuel generation, especially through gas turbines. So all this valley period that you see, which is your unrecovered cost. So, and the kink that you see on the top, that is your maybe few hours in 1 year. That's the dilemma. So what you need to, should I continue supplying that peak, or do I have a method to reduce that peak? So the lower peak is relatively, if you approach it and get it through your demand response, you can reduce that peak. But then how much capacity do I need to install, which is the top line? Total installed through, you need to have some sort of reserve margin beyond your demand. So, and then each aspect, there is so many programs to basically develop for demand forecasting. There are tens of techniques for demand forecasting, but then there are tens of packages for the generations production simulation, how to optimize this dispatch, okay, and hourly simulation, minute by minute simulation. You need to create market signals. I can go and on this graph, and my talk will never end. So that's how important this graph is. So we need to consider each and single hour, if not a minute, because this can be then divided into a day. It can be divided into a month. It can be divided into a season, or it can be divided into the whole year. So we need to keep some sort of margin, 10 to 20% capacity. Otherwise, because if some generation is not operating, then you might get into trouble. You might have to do forced load shedding. So it has to capture fuel constraint. It has to, so all the dispatch, all the outages, maintenance cycles, you name it. So it's a very, very complex mechanism to supply this kind of demand on a supply side, on a demand side, and even on the distribution of the transmission side. Now, so if I simply the same graph, if I simply plot this, so your megawatt demand, maximum megawatt demand, and for how much time, if put that in the reverse order. So maximum demand on the left and the lowest demand on the right, and plot each and single hour. That is how, so it means then you will know what is my base load capacity. Base load capacity means supply of power 100% of the time. Then how much power I need to supply for 90% of the time and 5% of the time. So it is on the row, on the x-axis, it is percentage of time, and on the y-axis, it is capacity. So what does it tell me? So it, at least help me to decide on the technologies. So what sort of plant should I select to supply my base load? And what type of plant and for how much time do I need for load following capacity? And how much do I need for my peaking duty? So this is a very, very useful graph. And because, again, because the cost is different, technology is different, and so it makes the life more complex, the overall planning cycle. But all these things have to be considered. Otherwise, if you do not consider these things, the circular that you see, that you hear about, then that's the result. So if you do not plan properly, or if you do reactive planning, so that's the result. Similarly, transmission planning, I'll not bore you with, but naturally, this all generation, wherever you install, this generation cannot be supplied through air. They need a medium, and the medium is transmission lines and the distribution lines. And unless you turn on your switch at home, only then electricity starts flowing from the generator. Otherwise, that generator is of no use. All these wires that we lay throughout Pakistan afterwards and at your house, they are of no use if you do not switch on at home, either you're turning on your fan or light or whatever. So all the supply chain, all the way, fuel supply, generation, supply, they need to make sense. So the reason we couldn't use, although it's a 4,000 megawatt of capacity of HVDC line, but can we really operate it at 4,000 these days? No, 24, max 28, because we do not have the receiving and infrastructure, because that got delayed. It's a government process, procurement process. One tender, if got killed for whatever reason, so you are delayed by one year. And if you do not follow the process, you face snap. Okay, so it's a very complex phenomena on the procurement side, on the supply side, on the planning side, on the operation side. So electricity utility business is not a child's play. It's a complex thing, and we are making it further complex. So what we need to do, we need to prepare ourselves for the next challenge. So this is the process that should be followed if we really want to avoid these circular debts, and if we want to pave right thing for our next generation. Integrated energy planning framework. So you review what I have, then you finalize your assumptions, you do demand forecast, or then you do integrated system plan, or then all the analysis that you do, economic, financial, environmental, social, and production simulation. Then you do risk analysis, then you do scenario analysis, if and what, if this happens, what will be the result? If that happens, what will be the results? Only then you provide an integrated system plan, and then you pass it through the regulatory cycle, and if there are observations, but you do not submit to the regulator at the end and then start questioning your assumptions. No, all this, the bottom, stakeholder consultation. You as a customer, and a transmission company as a proponent, or a generation company, whoever, they have to come forward and provide their feedback through when the process is being, occurring, not at the end. So at the end, then again, 1 year delay will occur. So like it happened, first 2 years, that IGSAP was sent back. Only the third year that IGSAP was approved. So although this was not still optimal, but so I think maybe regulator felt, like maybe it's too much because we are not following the process. So now at least people are following the process because this is it. So let's give approval because this is just indicator. But we need to make that process robust so that we capture all this, flaws along the process, not at the end. So this is the process which is being followed. But again, there is no stakeholder consultation here. It happens at the end, and sometimes procurement precedes planning. So the plant is decided early on, and then you do the planning, and then you justify it. And it had happened in Pakistan. And so you do not even, all our previous generation, which were decided in 13, 14, never saw NEPRA approval prior approval. So your tariff, so either it fits into the plan or not, the tariff was given. So even if the regulator was not really, comfortable with the process, or they were not familiar with the process, so to speak. So what we are proposing, a robust process. So now some sort of planning process is being followed. Hopefully with time we'll improve. So as I mentioned earlier, so all this 6 function has to be done through independent system operator. As you might be aware, so there is a separate lessons out of this dispatch function that NTDC is doing. So dispatch function is being separated, and it is called system operator. And some of you may have read, grid code, or you might have read, there's the application that NTDC and system operator has submitted, or NEPRA Act. So all these 6 functions have to be done, which is naturally planning, procurement, and system operation, or then rather efficient operation of the market, or then enforcement of the reliability standards, and considering the energy efficiency programs. So all these have to be done under one umbrella if you really want to progress. And this is the similar structure in USA. This is a proven concept. So the rest of the world, especially in North America and in Australia, European market is a bit different. But this is the slide. You have a copy of this slide. But so all these are, this colored stuff is where the markets are, and the states which are not colored, they are still vertically integrated utilities. So even in US, you still have vertically integrated utilities. So let's we come back close to home. So this is our locations of our generations. This is the total megawatt of each technology that we are operating, total installed. Now after, this is before Shanghai Electric. So another 1320 has been added. So this is, it has gone over 41,500 or so. So, so these are the technologies, and this is our demand, between the 21-22 terawatt hours or gigawatt hours. So the percentage, 81% of your demand is north of Guddu, as I said. So Sindh and Balochistan, Sindh and Balochistan, and the total, including K Electric, is account for only 19%. Rest of the demand of the country, 81%, is in the north. So we have to see, so where we are locating our generation. Yes, we cannot, we could have avoided, nuclear, but we did, we could have avoided imported coal if we would have developed our Tharcoal early on. So, and we also made those imported coal plants as our baseload plants. So, which is, we created challenge for ourselves to build a long transmission network and supply all the power that we need all the way to Peshawar, which is, you cannot operate the system one-handed. So it means we have to have some power to hold that, otherwise you are vulnerable to collapses. So this is the challenge that we have to meet down the road. So here are, this is only represented in the percentage sense. And in the IGSF 22, overall 68,000 is the, right now from 40, we will go to 68 or 69. Some of the committed capacity are about 18,000 is the candidate capacity. Predominantly, it is hydro and solar and wind. So, and some of the renewable, this low cost hydro or renewable technologies, they will displace RLNG and RFO plants. And the demand that we are seeing, or we are projecting, is about 42,000 megawatt. So now let's worry about the transmission capacity. So the transmission capacity increase, and you need at least, about $4 billion till next 2025 and 26. So huge investment to facilitate that generation. and to incorporate that generation into the system and to run the system reliably. And this is only the bulk transmission. Almost equivalent amount of, if not more, will be required for the distribution. So the next 4 or 5 years, $8 billion at least on the T&D infrastructure. Now, here, I can give you some, more overview on spinning reserve. Why do we need it? And, what type of generation responds to it? Naturally, hydro, especially the storage hydro, gas turbines, okay, and some of the RFP plants, those respond relatively quickly for the frequency change. Your combined cycle or your coal plants are nuclear, so their response, they're slow, but nuclear and some of the renewable energy sources that zero contribution in your frequency control. Only the storage, battery storage, fast battery storage, those can provide me my frequency regulation. So, how much spinning reserve do we keep for ourselves? Typically, largest unit, because if that unit is out, the frequency will go down. Either you go to under frequency load shedding, or if you want to come, free of under frequency load shedding, you need to keep sufficient spinning reserve. It means extra capacity on the system. And how do I explain with the example? It is here. If you have a system on the left-hand side, you're supplying 400 megawatt of system demand, and you have 5, 100 megawatt units. So it means 100 megawatt extra. What do? You operate each plant at 80. So there will be 100 megawatt of spinning reserve that is maintained 20 megawatt each at each plant. And if, let's say, due to any reason, one generator goes out, so the rest of the units will pick up those 20 megawatts at each plant. So 80 megawatt will be recovered through the remaining 4 plants. That's how you will maintain the frequency. Otherwise, you need to shed load. So that's why the spinning reserve is kept, and you need to bear that operating cost. Otherwise, if you do not keep sufficient spinning reserve and you try to save, collapse happens, as you noticed on 23rd of January. Similarly, so you are constrained on the transmission. I have been talking about these transmission constraints. So, and I think I should stop here and ask you for questions. Otherwise, this may become too technical, and I don't want to bore you with more technical material. But because I'm almost an hour into my presentation, because we started about 5 minutes late. So I'm open for questions if people like to ask.
Dr. Asif Qureshi here. Thank you very much for this highly illuminating session. It's been really educational for me personally, and must have been for a lot of other participants as well. Our chat box is now available for posting any questions, so the participants are free to post their questions. Let me take this opportunity to ask the first question from my side, and that is, you mentioned about the massive investment which is required in both transmission and distribution over the next couple of years. You mentioned a figure of close to about $4 billion in transmission alone, and a similar amount for distribution as well. Do you think that by keeping this transmission and distribution sector within the state control, we can have this kind of investment made, or do you think that the sector should be opened up to the private sector for investing both in transmission and distribution?
Certainly, because that is one of the bottleneck, because the government sector has to follow their PPRAs, and their procurement processes. So the country is suffering from that because that 500 kV station, Lahore North, because it got delayed, because it never, even the procurement process took 2 years. And now we are facing those constraints. So by all means, if those developments, so there has to be a mechanism, public-private partnership. I mean, it's not, it can, the government sector alone, their processes, or even their capacity, their manpower, does not have capacity and capability to have that projects implemented. No way. So huge opportunity, and we need to educate the government and, and devise mechanisms so that to help them out. Don't rely on them. They will do it. They are so busy. They cannot think other than the routine job that they're doing. So we cannot blame them. Their resource constraint, their capacity constraint, their capability constraint, their process constraint. So they cannot do it. So yeah, other mechanisms have to be developed, and naturally, management models, then the public-private model, and then the privatization model. So, but it's not overnight. It has to be a transition. So, but that's a separate discussion we can have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Another question from Dr. Shahid Rahim, and I have to ask this question. He says that you spoke about the future power grid, smart grid, intelligent fed, and supported here. And there are new and improved generation control and management technologies, microgrids capable of operating as islands by interconnected with a national or regional grid. But all of this is an extension of conventional AC synchronous grid. Can we dare dream of switching to a different system altogether? Like the early years of the power industries beginning in the 1880s, which is small, independent, standalone DC systems and grids? Will it not save us from maintaining reserves, excess capacity losses?
Yes, now, because we have to transition. That is because previously the technology was not available. That is how this system evolved the way it evolved. But down the road, that is what I said, all these wire companies may go out of business. I said it because that's the future. That's where we should be going. So either you can only go to this large scale power plants only if we are building industries. But if we are not building industries, do not even go that route. They will still enter into the circular debt. So that's the planning exercise. People have to educate themselves. Like future is those microgrids. So, when I was at NTDC in 2016 and 17, so I was asked to extend your grid to Gwadar. I said, no, because the technologies are available. We can have a microgrid there. This is, I'm talking about 7 years ago. So that we can develop that microgrid right there, and then why I have to take 800 kilometers of long line, and how will I maintain it? So let's focus on a microgrid. So similarly, some of the utilities, like we are far-flung areas in Balochistan, as you know, distances are huge, very small amount of load. Why to extend grid to those communities when the new technology is available? So because the utilization factor of that asset is going to be negligible. So how can you recover that cost? How much tariff you can hike? So yeah, I agree with the Dr. Saab. So that's the future. And that's where we need to gear ourselves toward those technologies, enable ourselves and in the community around us and the professionals around us, teach them, transfer that technology wherever we find a resource so that we can adopt the new concepts.
So Dr. Saab, do you think there is a mind change amongst the policymakers, regulators, system operators, market operators, stuff like that, about the future of electricity grid? The planning process, like Dr. Shahid Rahim wrote in one of his articles, the planning processes which have worked in the past for the last 100 years or so for the industry are not going to work in the future, because the smaller plants are becoming more competitive. So the future planning processes will have to be different. And you mentioned yourself about the microgrids and distributed models of generation and distribution. So you think that there is a mindset change, or at least the thinking taking place at the government and policy level, that the future is going to be very different and they have to adapt and plan accordingly?
What I can say at the moment, I know some of the circles that were talking about transferring all these distribution companies to the provincial entities. This is like it's not the level that we expect, what the government is thinking. Because who is government? You and I. So maybe at some stage, so Dr. Shahid or myself or a few others in the industry, so they may be having much more knowledge than the typical the government entities. So who are their advisors? Some of them may be foreign entities, World Bank and those, but things do not move in the government that easily. So as customers or as professionals, we need to sow that seed inside the government, so that, like I showed you the integrated system, integrated energy planning. And I know Dr. Saab says that those days are gone, and I agree. But this transitioning still, because you need to keep that now, you need to transition into this separate grids and independent grids. So, but you cannot lose what has already happened. So, so transitioning is important. So those, in the government, while planning integrated system planning or integrated energy planning, you need to do these sectoral or regional planning, so that we do not, that's why it is integrated planning. You do not to meet, see, if I would have been the managing director NTDC when this decision was being made for nuclear, I would have, over my dead body, I would have allowed these nuclear power plants in South, because I understand the overall integrated challenges that this will pose to my system. But it was decided because it was silo planning, or it was reactive planning. But it has happened. But now the thing is, we need to transition. We need to build maybe more industrial sites close to Karachi, or not only Dhabeji. Or do not allow K Electric to build anything. All their demand should be met from the southern power plants. Otherwise, you need to bring this power to north. Okay, so many innovative things can be thought of. But again, it's a decentralized planning, but slowly and smoothly through the integrated approach.
Okay, so next question is from Hafiz Uwais Ahmed Khan. He's asking, what is the solution of excess installed generation capacity, and how do we reduce our CPP?
No solution unless you develop your industrial base. So you cannot have a 40,000 installed capacity and having a base load of 8,000. So either you restructure all your financial setup, okay? So reduce your capacity payment, you can say exposure, as you rightly pointed out once, financial engineering. So either you do that, change those agreements to have a less exposure. Maybe if it's a 10-year agreement, make it 15, make it 20, okay? Or renegotiate some of those, with the lending agencies, so that we are having trouble, making those payments. That is on supply side. But I believe the solution is on the demand side. And demand side has to be all captive power plant, wherever inefficient, all those subsidies should be taken out. So overnight, grid has to be made capable. Reliability has to be increased, technology exists, all those interruptions or fluctuations can be corrected, in no time by StatComs. So all the technology and the transmission infrastructure should be done so that we can enable. So all that 2,000 or 3,000 of captive power plant should come to the grid, and they should be given not 2 lines, they should be given 3 lines, and whatever is needed to be installed on their premises for reliability of power, they should be installed, battery storage, whatever. But still, all these solutions will be cheaper than giving capacity payment of those plants and by increasing the tariff, but you need to increase your base. So that's the only solution on the demand side.
Okay, sir, one final question before we wrap this up. And my apologies to all the people who've posted their questions in the chat box because in the interest of time, we could not entertain them all. Just final question is in the last State of Industry report, NEPRA pointed out an important issue, and which is these IPPs which are built, which were contracted on build on operate basis. So they'll get to retain their land, their plant, and all the transmission infrastructure which was built around them. And a lot of these PPAs are now coming up. They're coming at the end of their terms. So that infrastructures will no longer be available. So what can the government do about it? What can NTDC or CPP do about it? About the infrastructure that will no longer be available, and there's a lot of investment which has been made by NTDC.
Yeah, use them as ancillary power. You know what the real cause of collapse? Because of non-availability of generation along the way. Guddu 747 was not available because of insurance issues. Kotadu was not available because of its PPA issues, because it expired. Muzaffargarh was the other furnace plant, Lal Pir, they were not operating because of they are expensive. And you try to run the system. So the farthest generation was Thar, and the next generation which was available was 1,150 kilometers away in Haveli Bahadur Shah. And the demand was only 11, and without any fault, system collapsed. Why? Because we need to make them as our ancillary service providers. So have them, like I told this to one of the gatherings, rather at very high up gatherings. So how the transmission capability reduces with the distance. I said, if you look at this, balls that I put up, remove this ball in the middle, this yellow ball, and try to hang, let's say, a concrete beam.
Sorry, Doctor, below.
Can you hear me now? Hello. Can you hear me now? Hello. Hello.
Yes, Dr. Sir, we can hear you, but I think Asaf Qureshi, the connection is not working.
Oh, okay. So what I was trying to, this is, I'll be done in a half a minute. This yellow or orange dot that you see in the middle, if you remove this, assume this is a steel beam or a concrete beam between the two nodes, which is 50 meters away. Now you try to put a load on that beam. So let's say it is capable of, without deflecting, 100 kgs. And if you put 101, it will deflect and break. You put up, a column in between at 25. What do you think? What's the loading capability of that concrete beam is now? Almost doubled, isn't it? Similarly, when the transmission is being operated at a remote power plants, the capability of the path is almost half. But if you have power plants, that's how the all the system was designed. But because of cheaper resources available in the south, and we put not NTDC, but we put on somebody else's decision those power plants on the coast, now to bring them all the way to north and retiring the existing plants in the middle. Can you really operate the system this way? No. So we have to do study. So how much, when to be used, those plants to be used as ancillary service for voltage control, so that we can enhance the transfer capability of the path.
Right, sir. Dr. Sir, thank you so very much for sparing the time and putting this wonderful presentation together for our audience today. This entire session will be available on our social media platforms. It was a wonderful session, that highly educational for me personally. And I hope to have you with us in future for different discussions on energy related topics, both on virtual platforms and also in person as well. So once again, thank you so very much. And I'd like to thank all the participants who took out the time to join us for this session today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Just in the end, thank you so much. We'll just share your feedback by scanning the QR code, or we'll send you the link. Thank you, Dr. Fiaz, and everyone else. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Allah.